Well, welcome, Reunion. I am so thrilled that you have chosen to be with us here this morning. Just as I was getting ready to come on, my son Solomon said, "Where are we going, Dad?" I said, "Daddy's getting ready to do church. What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I thought we were going somewhere because you were dressing up nice." So that's the status here in the McKinney household. I don't know if you can resonate with putting on some nicer clothes just to get out of the house, but maybe it's been a while. But I'm hoping you're in your PJs this morning as we get ready to jump into a great service for us today as we wrap up this series, When Life Sucks. And it's been an incredible series as we've had a lot of different special guests and giving wisdom and insight on the different topics. But man, I hope today you are going to be challenged and inspired, but also encouraged. We're going to go ahead and worship with Kyle and Allie here in a minute. But before we do that, I want to encourage you to share and like this so that your friends and family can join in today, because I believe it's going to be a powerful message for many people to hear as we get ready to jump into our last week on When Life Sucks. But for right now, let's listen in as we get ready to worship along with Kyle and Allie.
Good morning, friends. It's so good to be back with you again. Hey, I want to invite you to sing out to a great God, a God that is in control. There is nothing that He can't do. Let's sing out today. Just one word, you calm the storm that surrounds me. Just one word, the darkness has to retreat. Just one touch, I feel the presence of heaven. Just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe. There's nothing that God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can move. Oh, praise the name who makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Just one word, you heal what's broken inside me. Just one word, and you revive every dream. Just one touch, I feel the power of heaven. Just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a mountain that He can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a prison wall He can't break through. Oh, praise the name makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Yeah. Sing us out. Sing, I will believe. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. I will for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all There's not a mountain that he can move. Oh, praise the name, makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Yeah, there's nothing that our God can't do. There's not a prison wall he can't break through. Oh, praise the name, makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Yeah. Give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, restore every heart that is broken, and great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken, and great are you, Lord. Your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise, it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. All the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise, hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. God, you are so great. You are so good. God, the fact that you love us enough to send your Son to come alongside of us, to suffer alongside of us, to suffer for us and to die for us. God, also that us imperfect people could be with you. God, we're grateful for that love. We're grateful for your greatness. And it is in your name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, friends. I'm not sure if you heard me or not, but my son said, "Dad, where are you going? You're getting all dressed up." I said, "I'm doing church. What are you doing?" That's the kind of the status of our house these days. Well, hey, I wanted to let you know about a couple of things, Reunion. We've been joining in with the Westminster Free Medical Clinic and just wanted to tell you a couple of cool pieces of news. Over the last month, we've been able to give resources and food to the Westminster Free Medical Clinic. It's a great resource here in our community. And over the last 2 months, we've been providing various different things for them as they feed 250 families plus. Last week, we gave 300 pounds of food, which is equivalent of about 72 beans and rice, pasta type bags. And they sent us a video, and I wanted to share it with you here this morning, just so you could hear a thanks message from their director.
My name is Lisa Sapanili. I'm the Executive Director of Westminster Free Clinic here in Thousand Oaks. We would like to thank you for all your support over the years, especially now during COVID-19. It's been a really challenging time, and as an essential service, we've been open. We've been providing free medical care, free emergency dental services, free mental health services, as well as providing fresh produce to over 250 families each week. And that is possible because of the support of the community. Our families that we serve, 80% of them are from Thousand Oaks and Newbury Park. They work in the restaurant industry, they work in the hotels and other service industries here locally and don't have work right now. So they're really scared about getting COVID-19, and they share that they're really scared about how they're going to pay their rent and how they're going to feed their families. So it's a really challenging time for all of us. And I'm very confident as a community we can come together and we're going to get through this, and we're going to be stronger as a result of all that we've been through these last months. And we thank you for all your support over the past year. Some of this data that you're seeing is from this past year. And we hope we'll be able to do a lot of good together in the future. Thank
I
you.
know. My wife is offering me video tips, so she's like, "You're on the video." So, hey, I'm shooting from my home. What are you going to do? Hey, Reunion. It's just an incredible ministry that we get to be a part of. And so I wanted to encourage you to join in with us as we give back to the community in this way. They're doing some amazing things for people who don't have insurance. And as you heard on that video, there's just a lot of need here in this city. There's beans, fruit, and personal items and diapers. Those are things that we will want to collect. If you can do it, great. If not, no worries. But we would love to invite you to do that. You can go to reunionto.com and find out more information there. Well, now's the time where we get to give back to God in a different way. You can text a number amount to this number. You can go online to our website and click the Give button there, or you could also do the ACH option as well. Well, one of the things that I want to let you know about is the fact that one of the hardest things about this season is that we're not able to see people. Michelle and I have driven around and seen different folks, and that's cool, but we're not able to see some of you. And so we wanted to do something a little bit different. We wanted to hold a reunion Zoom gathering next weekend. Today is our last time for this series, or this last weekend for this series, and then we are going to go ahead and be joining in together on Zoom next week. We know that the church isn't built around Mark McKinney. We know that the church isn't built around a building. The church is actually us. Me, you and our families and our communities coming together to be a part of a family together. And so next week, we're going to do something a little different. We're in a season where we can try different things, and so we're going to try that. And so we'll be emailing out and going on our social medias to let you know about the various different things that are going to be where you can go to do that on Zoom. But please make sure to do that. My wife said, hey, ladies want to know ahead of time so that you can do your makeup. Maybe guys, you want to actually do your hair if you have any on top of your head. But we just want to be together as a family, see each other's faces, and to be encouraged in that way. So I'm excited about that opportunity to be able to do that together next weekend. Same time, just a little bit different format, okay? Well, today I'm excited about being able to join in with an interview as we've been doing over the last couple of weeks with different guests as we've kind of changed up our format on how we're doing this series, When Life Sucks. We've brought in various different people and experts and real life examples of how God has been speaking through them and also teaching us different life lessons. Well, today we have a special guest. His name's Brian Hickson, and I'll talk about him here in a few minutes, but back in 2004, Michelle and I began to watch this show called Lost. And it was a great show. It was about a plane crash and how it went down and the survivors ended up on the island. And this island was kind of crazy and wacky as well. And so this island was always throwing something new and different and bizarre at the characters on the island. And so they were going through these various different things, and every season, every episode, my wife and I were talking, I wonder what's going to happen next. I wonder how this is going to turn out. What's going to happen to this person? And here's the thing. They ended horribly. It was the worst series finale ever. It's my opinion, but I believe that it's true. Now, why am I telling you about a series that ended poorly that I had a love-hate relationship with called Lost? And here's why, is that I feel like we've been living in a season or a series called Lost for the last 6 to 7 weeks. I mean, we've had this crash where everything kind of ground to a screeching halt. We've met all kinds of interesting people, maybe actually the ones you're living with for the first time in a long time, but news anchors, government and health officials, and that kind of stuff. There's this question of what's going to happen next. When are we going to reopen? Does everybody have to have this vaccine type thing going on? And then there are the conspiracies, right? These thoughts and ideas that are out there of like, what's actually behind the virus? And really, why is Bill Gates behind vaccines, right? I mean, these are all conspiracies that are out there, and I mean, crazy are the times. But here's a few things that I know are for sure are true, and here they are. One is, God is still on his throne. 2, Jesus saves. And 3, we are still called to go and make disciples. Listen, I believe the opportunities will only increase for followers of Jesus to bring hope and peace and purpose to the people that we are in contact with on a daily basis because of this season. And I believe that there is a whole host of people in your community waiting to be interrupted with the hope that you can bring them. You know, one of the reasons why we did this series and the reason why we did it the way we did it is to remind us, to inform us, and to equip us to become more empathetic towards those who might be hurting during this season and to help bring healing to them and to be aware and equipped to come alongside folks. You know, it's been different, as I've mentioned before, by bringing in different experts and real-life examples like Jimmy and Marna, and last week we had Julie, and it's been fun to do that. But to catch this important piece, please catch this, and why we believe it's important that this series was paramount for us to do. Even though maybe, hopefully here in a little bit, we'll celebrate opening back up soon, there will be people, though, who have not been able to mourn the loss of a loved one. There will be folks who have lost their jobs, who are in debt up to their eyes. There will be depression that will increase because of the various different trickle-down effects, and the list goes on, right? But listen, The point is that we are only touching the tip of the iceberg of really what this current season is going to do to our culture and the future of our communities and of our lives. Now, listen, while this may seem crazy and a little bit like a doomsday type message, it's actually quite the opposite. It's a call for us to step into the incredible opportunity that God's people have in this moment to be prepared, equipped, and to come alongside those hurting and broken. Throughout the century, that's what God's people have done. They've gone into the burning building to save those people instead of running away from it. And that's what we're doing right now. We want to run towards the hurt. We want to run towards the broken. We want to run towards the communities and the people in them that need the hope, purpose, and forever family that God can bring them. Well, as we wrap up this series, When Life Sucks, my prayer is that we as a family can take to heart the call for followers of Jesus to look at those around us through a different lens. That even though you might be okay, probably your neighbor or your coworker or maybe even another family member might be struggling during this season and for the foreseeable future. That we would empathize with them and that this would actually create a launching pad through our church of health and healing and sending people who get healed up from our empathetic response through our equipped people to launch them back out into being on mission for the gospel in our community. Today we have our final guest, and I'm super excited about this guy, and especially how I feel like God has brought all of this together. I met Brian through our family seeking out help for our family, and we came to know him through the Brain Performance Center, and he and I talked about him maybe being interviewed sometime, and then we put together this When Life Sucks series, and it just so happens to come upon me as I was looking at this last weekend. I kind of came to this understanding and like aha moment of like, man, the first 4 weeks of talking about grief, loss, believing the lies inside of our heads, trauma and depression, all of those affect a lot of things. But they affect one thing across the board, and that's our brain. And so today we're going to have a conversation. Brian and I are going to have a conversation that I wanted you to listen in on the impacts that those things have in our current situation of traumatic events and maybe what people's past have done or have influenced people's brains and their lives in a different way, and how our brain responds and how God created us so uniquely. So I'm excited to introduce to you Brian Hickson. He has worked with Olympic athletes, pro athletes. He's contracted by the Department of Defense. He's on contract with AARP. He's one of few people in the world to have viewed and processed 10,000 plus brain scans. He's a neuroscientist. Much smarter guy than me, for sure. He's also a follower of Jesus, and that's what makes him so unique in this field. So let's listen in to what Brian and I talk about today as we equip our church to come alongside those who are hurting. And I'm recording. Well, Brian, hey, thank you so much for joining us here at Reunion. And I'm recording. Well, Brian, hey, thank you so much for joining us here at Reunion. Grateful that you're here with us.
Great to be here.
I know that you're a busy man, but before we kind of jump into really what I wanted to get to talk to you about today, just want to hear a few personal things about you so that we can know that you're human and not just some guy on the other side of the country, but you're actually here with us in Southern California in Thousand Oaks. You have a wife and some kids. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
I do. I have a wife who's been married for almost 2 decades here, and I've got a 20-year-old, 21-year-old son. I've got a 15-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. So we kind of started all over after the 15-year-old, which was my wife's doing. She talked me into it. So I can't even say it was an accident. You know, it's like, no, it was planned. But she's the greatest thing that's ever happened. So we love her. But, 3-year-old during this pandemic, stuck in the house is another level.
That's another job.
Yeah, the 15 and 20, I could have managed those pretty easy.
Yeah. Yes, and I know exactly what you're saying. It's definitely been hotel crazy here, is what I'll call it.
Yes.
That's cool. And you grew up here in Southern California, or at least in California. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. We actually was born down here in Woodland Hills area. When I was about 8 years old, my parents decided to sell everything and move up to San Luis Obispo and buy a 20-acre ranch and have horses and cows and pigs and do that whole thing out in the country. And then I moved back down here about 10 years ago, down to Thousand Oaks.
Okay, right on. Awesome. Well, in my opinion, I told Reunion a little bit about you before we hopped on this interview, but you have a pretty fascinating job to me personally that takes you all over. Can you share just what exactly is it that you do, and who are some of your clients, or at least groups of people that you've worked with?
So I'm a neuroscientist, and in neuroscience, we're really looking at the physiology of the brain. And really looking at how the brain impacts different behaviors, different way you do things, cognitive decline, dementia, attention deficit, anxieties, all those type of things. So we're really looking at more of the hardware of the brain versus just someone's behavior in itself. And, with my job, I've worked, a lot. I've got some large contracts with the Department of Defense, Special Forces, U.S. Army, where we do a lot of work with really training soldiers and brain mapping and understanding post-traumatic stress disorders and things like that. I also help run a program for AARP, which is their brain health program and their dementia prevention program called Staying Sharp. And just love being part of that team and really looking at the latest research on what we can do to keep our brains healthy and stay sharp as we age. And then I've got 3 brain performance centers here, one in Calabasas and 2 in Westlake Village. One that's actually on campus of Oaks Christian School, where we do a lot of training for concussion activity. We do a lot of anxiety, where we can train out the physiology that's causing anxiety. Some areas of attention deficit, where we can actually train up that part of the brain to be able to pay attention longer and have better impulse control and different things like that. We've also worked a lot with pro sports teams, the U.S. Olympic teams, Red Bull High Performance. So we've done a lot of high performance athletes, over 1,000 athletes all over the world. So.
Wow. So you kind of work with a few people.
A few people, to say the least. Yeah.
And I read somewhere, I think in your bio, that you've looked at over 10,000 brain scans, or what does that actually mean?
Well, there's only about 3 people in the world that have actually interpreted and gone over that many brain scans. So an EEG brain scan is very much like an EKG for the heart, except we use a headset and we put it on and we can record the electrical activity coming off the brain. So I meet with people all day long and go over what their brain's doing that's causing some of the symptoms maybe they have. A lot of it has to do with even just poor sleep cycles. So many conditions are due to poor sleep cycles. So you fix sleep, you fix about 60 to 70% of mental health.
And all the newborn parents are saying yes. Agreed.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Well, when I look at the human body, and in particular the brain, it leads me to one conclusion every single time. And it's this conclusion of like, man, there is only one thing that this leads me to believe, and that we were created by an amazing God.
Absolutely.
I mean, it just how it works. And through some of my conversations with you and learning about this, how the brain actually even kind of, I don't know if evolve is the right word, but creates new pathways, and it's always growing or learning, and how and what it controls within our body and our thoughts. What about the brain do you find so interesting or incredible that you've devoted your career to it?
Yeah. What's so fascinating about it, it's just like you said, that there's so many, the way it's controlling the whole body, it creates the mind of how we think and process information, the complexity of it. Definitely there's no doubt in my mind that there's a creator with that. But the other side of it is that the balance of the technical components of the brain with the emotional, spiritual, personal components of the brain that really show a creator that's a personal creator. That's not just making a robot, that's making something that is built for personal connections, for that bonding, that empathy, and the just the way that works so beautifully together. It's such an intimate, portion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just mind blowing to see how it all works. Well, I met you in particular because of my family and the makeup that has God brought our family together through the power of adoption, and we're just huge advocates for that. But we also were looking for resources to help give our kids the best outlook on life and the best possible chances to thrive. And I'm not going to lie, I haven't shared this with you, but when Michelle said, "Hey, I made us an appointment over at the Brain Performance Center," and then I heard what it was, I was a little skeptical at first.
Yeah.
Because I was like, he's going to do what with what? And when we sat down, though, and you began to describe my children without even meeting them, really, you described them because of the brain scan that you did, or that your center did on my child, and you basically described each one individually to the T almost. That's when I was kind of like, there must be something here. So,
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you've had people tell you that multiple times over the years.
Right.
But it was incredible, quite honestly. We had numerous conversations about how childhood experiences early childhood and how it affects the brain and how it's developed. Could you describe for me how negative and traumatic events, whether it's maybe a difficult pregnancy or abuse, or even things like divorce, a pandemic,
Yeah.
how do those things affect the brain or impact?
Right. Let me bring up one slide here that we can look at, and all right, you can see this image of the two kind of sides of the head there.
Yep.
Perfect. So what I want to show on this is that there's two main structures of the brain. If we had to break it down in just two basic structures, there's a lot of small structures, but obviously just a high level. So the high level, first of all, we have this cortex, which is this upper area of the brain, and it's the kind of 1-inch layer of the outside of the brain, and it is the learned responses. Okay, this is what we learn each day. This grows the more we learn new things. Okay, and then we have this inside structure called the limbic system, and this limbic system is our survival guide. Okay, this is the part of the brain that keeps us alive. This detects threats. This also processes emotions. It processes mood. It processes anger, rage. It really just keeps us alive. Okay, it's the very kind of this animal instinct kind of side. Now, a newborn baby is born with a lot of this limbic system all intact, and that's why they cry when they're hungry. They tell you every time they're uncomfortable. It's a survival instinct. But a newborn baby cannot smile or be happy right at first, because happiness is a learned response. You have to grow this cortex enough to be able to assimilate and feel secure. And once you're secure, you can have happiness. Okay, so that's why a newborn baby, over time, they're using this limbic system, they're crying out, they're having fear, there's all these things. And then over time, seeing mom and dad all the time, over and over, knowing their needs are getting met instantly, all of a sudden they start feeling secure. And that activity in that limbic system settles down, actual electricity settles down into a nice resting state. And then this cortex up here has seen mom and dad over and over, the repetition. It starts to grow all these connections. And then all of a sudden that baby can smile when they see mom and dad. And they feel a sense of security and happiness. But this limbic system has to be calmed down first. So in this, the brain is wired for survival first. So if this starts to get overactive, it starts to stop us from feeling more logical, from feeling what we've learned before. I think, even so much with, I'm such a big proponent of, even journaling and thinking back of what God has done and how he's delivered you from things in the past, right?
Right.
And the reason being is because it takes the emphasis back to our cortex, to not be lost in the moment of how we feel in this limbic system right now, but that, you know what, every time we've been in these situations before, God's provided. God's provided. God's provided. So then we start feeling it up here and really rationalizing what's true. This is more the truth here. This is how we feel in the moment. We don't want to get lost in how we feel in the moment. And I think that's the problem with traumatic events, even like right now with this pandemic. You know, this is a novel coronavirus, meaning that the term novel is obviously new, right? So this, we don't have any learned responses to this. To the flu, we have a lot of learned responses. We know what sickness is. We know what all these things are. It doesn't bother us. It's part of our normal life. But this novel coronavirus sparks a lot of fear because it's new and because it's on the news 24 hours a day. But, and so right now, a lot of us are living in this limbic system and how we feel right now. And it's hard sometimes to get out of that and get back to this more logical, more truth. And that's where going back and looking how God's delivered us, what he's done, what his plan is, really helps us get back to that side.
Yeah, so important. I think it's Psalm 107 where David is writing, and he talks about how in times of distress, I'm actually going to remember God's faithfulness.
Exactly.
And I think you said something to me and Michelle when we were going through this to help us understand, because you were showing us the brain scans and you were showing us the different frequencies, and there was a couple of scans where you explained it, and it was in regards to how trauma has impacted or how the brain has responded. And that is, imagine it like this: a car sitting in the driveway going at like 4,000 RPM all the time. And for me, that was kind of like an aha moment to understand even some of my children of like, man, they're constantly revved at 4,000 RPM. And sometimes pegged to 8,000 or whatever, but even in these times, for many people watching this video, we're running at that 4,000 RPM because this is a novel or a new experience for us.
Right.
Do you say that's true?
100%. And the other, even besides the novel experience for us, it's also our cultural norm is to run high. What we want to do is go work and process all day long. With kids, video games are keeping so much stimulus coming at us. But even adults, we always talk about the kids having all the social media. But adults, you can't even walk and stand in line, for a fast food restaurant right now without pulling your phone out and looking at something. And email, everything's meant to just stimulate us in our brain. It's hard just to have still time, and that's what, from a brain perspective, meditation is a biblical thing. Meditation is being present. It's really, meditating on God's word or on a promise or on a truth, and just paying attention to these small details without huge amount of stimulus, where we can actually pay attention and be present and meditate on that. And that actually helps our brain calm down from that 4,000 RPMs start to come down like this. But when we condition our brains at this level all the time, it makes it very hard. We can't just shoot it down because it's so conditioned to be up here that sometimes it takes some help to get it unstuck.
Right.
And come down.
Right. And we all know what happens to a car if it's stuck at, whatever RPM for a long time.
Absolutely. It's wearing. And that's the physical side of this. A lot of people are like, oh, I have anxiety. I have this. My brain never turns off. I can't fall asleep at night. But those are important symptoms that you need to fix because they disturb your life. But it's also wearing down on the brain. The actual hardware is starting to break down. And over decades and decades of this, there's higher risks associated with dementia to this, higher risks of things, like everything from Alzheimer's to Parkinson's to, depending on the area of your brain that's overactivating, it's kind of like having a resting heart rate at 100 beats per minute. It's going to break down. You're going to have a higher risk of cardiac disease if you continue with that.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for us to talk about this stuff because whether it's a child who has suffered an abusive situation from 0 to 7 years old, or somebody who was in a family that had an alcoholic, or a child from a hard place, or even somebody who has been in the military and has PTSD. One of the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks is like, hey, listen, you might be fine. You might have had the opportunity to have a pretty what I'll call chill life, to where you don't have too much traumatic stuff in your past. But there are millions of people who actually do suffer from this, who suffer from running at 4,000 RPM, and they may come off as hyperactive, they may come off as aggressive, they may come off as, a hothead, when in reality it's just not a symptom, but
physiology pushing them that way.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
And so for us as a church to wrap our arms around people and kids that have these traumatic things in their life, it just takes a little bit different empathetic response, other than like, hey, calm down, or hey, you shouldn't react that way. You're an adult, you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Well, if they haven't ever received treatment or worked through that stuff or learned how to bring themselves down, that's how it's always going to be.
From a physical side, I think I probably gave you this example of, we would never take someone in a cast with a broken arm and just say, hey, come on, lift like everybody else and do these things. And on the mental side, for everybody, but I think the church definitely has done this too. It's kind of like, hey, if you have anxiety, you obviously don't have enough faith. You're not giving it to God. Just let those things go. Right. And the problem is, anxiety is a physical thing. Those neurons are firing away. That person that has anxiety, if their normal is here, going from here to here could take more faith than the person that has a brain that's just normal, and they calm down and be like, oh, this is easy, right? Yeah. So the other person could be working harder at giving it to God all day long, and that little nudge down, and they still seem like they have so much anxiety. And the other person could just be naturally grown up, just perfect, whatever, had the perfect environment. Their brain just happened to be this way, and now it's just lowering easy. So it's important not to judge people when you see that, or just write them off as not enough willpower, or not enough, whatever it is, and to really think of it more as a physical type thing.
Yeah. The parenting style that we talked about last weekend, called TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention. We learned this phrase of in regards to children. Sometimes it's not necessarily a won't, but it's more of a can't. It's not that they won't do it or that they won't respond. It's that they can't respond in a healthy way, right? Or in a natural, what we would call normal way. Right. And I think that's just so important, that broken arm analogy of, like, you would never tell somebody, you would never tell me to grip. I ran my thumb through a table saw, everybody. So all the ADD people are thinking, can't concentrate because they're thinking about Mark's thumb. There, mystery solved. You would never say, hey, Mark, can you squeeze that right after I got my stitches?
Right.
Because I couldn't, because the pain would be so great. The same is true for this this brain conversation.
I think the other thing that I deal with, so many parents that come in and they say, my kid doesn't respond to consequences. I keep putting consequences up, and they keep doing it. They keep doing the same behavior. And when we scan their brains, we can see typically in the frontal portion of their brain all these waves that are slowing. These are the typical waves when you're first waking up, when you're not thinking very well at all. You're kind of spaced out and stuff. This slowing is like having the brakes on that frontal lobe of the brain. Now, what should happen is I should think about doing something, and it should go to my frontal portion of my brain, make a decision like, hey, last time I did that and got in trouble for it, maybe I shouldn't do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or last time I did that, I got what I wanted, maybe I should do it. Okay. And so it should go to the frontal portion of the brain to make a decision about. What happens with those kids is that part slows down so much that they think about doing something and they do it before this actually processes it. So therefore, a consequence for them doesn't do them any good, because they don't consider the consequence before they did it. Now, this is not just someone just impulsive and we just do it and you just need to learn how to do it. They physically can't. There's so much processing that happens from when I want to do something and when I actually do it, and it's skipping a whole step of judging should I do it or not. And when we train that brain back to normal, people always ask, well, when I train that brain, is it going to make them, good behavior? And I always tell them, we don't change behavior. Okay. What we do is we can change that and bring it back, speed that part of the brain up so it can start working. So now, next time, that kid will still do the same thing. They will do it and they'll get a consequence. But then the time after that, before they do it, they're going to think, they're going to have that split second to think, I got a consequence last time, maybe I shouldn't do it. Then consequences and rewards can start to shape behavior. We didn't do that. We just gave them a split second to think about it before. But if you don't have that, and we're sitting there giving consequence after consequence after consequence, and these kids, they're struggling because they don't even know why I'm getting a consequence. I didn't even mean to do that. And they didn't even think about those things before they did it. So there's so much physical side of the brain. It's not just behavior. It's not just this kid's bad or mean or doesn't want to. Everybody wants to get what they want. Everybody wants to do what's right. These things. But the problem is that some of the brains don't work the same as others.
Yeah. And man, I just, I grew up in conservative Midwest where it was you follow the rules or you get a consequence, you know, and I'm thinking more about church than my home. And I remember, having people, get after some kids who I could think back that now I know that they came from some really hard situations. Yeah. And it probably, maybe it was both but it's almost like they couldn't do what they were being asked to do,
Right.
And then they grew up to be adults.
Yeah.
Right. And so
exactly. Yeah.
let me there's two things that I want to touch on before we get to the hope filled side of things. And by the way, folks, I can just testify to seeing the concrete evidence of what Brian is talking about of retraining the brain. And again, just speaking to God's awesomeness and how he has kind of wired us to relearn or to fix ourselves. And it just is an amazing thing, but we've seen that in our family. I'm so thankful for guys like Brian that use their giftedness and how they're using it. So, but real briefly, Brian, can you talk about, because I want to talk about how this isolation, how negative thought, how listening to the continual negative news cycle, even and maybe even just on a personal level, when we talk to ourselves with that negative self-talk, the shame, what happens within the brain and the neural pathways, and when we do that on a continual basis?
Yeah. Well, when we say that inner talk, it's really the limbic system. It's how we feel starts talking to us. And the problem is when we're left alone in isolation and that happens, that limbic system self-talk, basically how we feel, starts basically affecting our cortex and our learned responses. So now how we feel is starting to influence how we believe we are, how the truth that we believe we are. So now it's not just in the moment and I can't just change, but it actually starts to rewire some of the networks in the brain to believe we're that way. And the other side is our brains, our cortexes are wired for social connection. One of the 5 pillars, 20% of what causes dementia later on in life is isolation. That it actually starts thinning and pruning those portions of our brain, of our cortex, and which causes major problems in the brain. So it's our brain needs that social connection, that interaction, both to counter our self-talk through that, but also just the relationship side actually keeps a lot of our brains strong and growing those connections between those neurons.
Yeah, so huge. And I think that's even where, we're blessed with this technology of Zoom.
Absolutely.
And we can bag on Facebook. And it's kind of a love-hate relationship that I think we all have with it, but yet it also keeps us semi-connected with people.
I think that it's probably, all this social media, the video conferencing and things we have, it probably gives us 50% less isolation than if we didn't have any of that. So it's not perfect. It doesn't cover the other 50%, but it does bridge the gap a little bit and make it a little bit less devastating to our brains.
Yeah, totally. Man, so many things that I want to talk about, but we're getting short on time, amazingly enough. What would you say to someone who is struggling with, right now, struggling with, these self-defeating thoughts, these anxious thoughts, even depressive thoughts, especially in this isolation? Like, what would you suggest? You've already mentioned maybe one or two things, the meditation side of things, but what would you say to them to maybe bump them out of that, or at least help them overcome some of those thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, they should realize that this isn't weakness. This is a physiological thing in their brain that's causing it. Okay? And if we focus on that, it empowers us. If I see a break in my arm, it empowers me that I can fix it. If I've gone to every doctor and I have arm pain and no one knows what it is, I'm starting to go crazy because I know I have arm pain and no one knows what it is. So first of all, realize it's a physical thing that is happening in your brain. So that helps you, realize when it's physical, we feel like we can fix it. Okay. The second thing is, just from, without going and getting a brain map and doing all these things that, we can do, just something everybody can do in their own home, is realize that physical exercise, getting your heart rate up, that could be even just a little bit fast-paced walk. Just get to where, you're having a little bit of a hard time, taking a breath a couple times while you're talking or something, and you feel your breath coming up. That right there starts to grow more connections across the brain and strengthens the brain. And a lot of anxiety and depression comes from starting to get weaker connections. And so they're straining more. So the more we can make those healthy and grow them, it takes away, there's as much scientific study that shows aerobic exercise helps for depression as is medication. So it's equal to it.
Now, you're not talking about going out running 15 miles and
No.
what would be a bare, I don't want to shoot for minimum, but what would be a bare minimum?
Absolutely. The minimum you should strive for is about 20 minutes of just a fast-paced walk. Doesn't have to be like, super fast. Just keep moving. Don't just scroll. Just kind of keep it going to where you feel your heart, just kind of you breathe in a little bit. You feel your breath kind of coming up. That's good for about 20 minutes, and try and do that about 3 days a week. But the more you can do that, the better. The other thing that really, adds a lot, it adds sugar, a lot of sugar, especially a lot of these, frappuccinos and shakes and all these type of things. They go in and they hit your body, and your body converts them to palmitic acid, which is a fat that gets into the membrane of the cells of the brain, and it actually slows down a lot of the neurotransmitters. So it slows down dopamine, which means that you get more depression. It slows down serotonin, which means you have more anxiety. So all these type of things too, nutrition is important. Yeah. Nutrition and exercise, we tend to throw those off as, those are just for our body and stuff, but for our brain, it's one of the most important things we can do at home.
Man. So good reminders, because I think many times, and I've done this over the last 6 to 7 weeks, of just like, oh, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm going to dive into this Ruffles bag.
Absolutely. And the problem, I just had a conversation with another doctor this morning. I said, we know exercise helps depression. The problem is someone with depression doesn't want to exercise.
Right.
The leap for someone with depression to exercise is huge.
Yeah.
Compared to, it's like me wanting to go out and do a marathon right now. I that's huge. I wouldn't want to do that. And that going out maybe on a walk could be that big of a thing for someone. So, the thing is to always start with just small steps, something you feel like you can do, just taking out a little bit and stuff, and just try and move towards it. A lot of times when we try and do such a big thing that it's such a big leap, we just say, forget it, I can't do it. Right. So right. Just little steps is great.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, last thing that I want to ask is, there might be one person, there might be 15 people who are really struggling, who feel like it's almost kind of like a hopeless situation when it comes to, as they're hearing this physiological conversation about their brain, and overcoming their challenges from their past trauma, abuse, PTSD, whatever it might be. What kind of hope could you potentially give to that person who might be listening?
Just a quick, experience in this. Probably over the last year in 2019, I probably had at least 20 kids, typically girls, junior high to, middle school to high school age. Their parents brought them in because they already attempted suicide. Okay. These are girls that have no hope. that are straight out of like West Hills, suicide hospital on watch already. They come in and their face is down. They don't want to be there at all. They've lost all hope. They don't want to go to one more appointment or anything.
Right.
And what I love about what I do, the most rewarding thing, is when you bring up an image of their brain and you start talking through the physiology and you start saying, because your brain's doing this, it's making you feel this way. Because it's doing this, it's making you feel this way. And you start pointing to the physical things, and they all of a sudden start looking up like, that's exactly how I feel. That's why I feel this way. I thought I was just lost. I thought there was no hope. And when you can start looking at the physiology, it doesn't point fingers at weakness. We don't I don't believe in mental diagnosis, because diagnosis is just a label. We need those for medicine at times, but they don't really do any help to label someone with attention deficit. It's much more advantageous to say, see this area of your brain, it's not firing off enough electricity, which is preventing you from holding your attention for very long. Okay, we need to work that out like we would a muscle, okay, or like a physical therapist would isolate a weak area and build it up, maybe my core, so I'm not having such a back injury whenever I pick up something, right? And so when we can look at the brain in that way, the hope that comes into, these girls' eyes, and they leave feeling empowered, like someone understands them. Because most of the time it's pointing down, you're doing something wrong, go on this medicine or do this or do that and everything. And you feel like it's you versus feeling like someone understands you. So, from a parent standpoint to a kid, I would say do your best to look at these mental symptoms as something physical and try and have empathy, try and understand what's going on, try and learn about it. Don't write them off as this kid's just being that way or doing this, or just why can't you be like your brother or your sister or things like that. If it's a parent doing it, understand that there's physical things going on here. It's so important that mental health, the basis of mental health is brain health. And we have to start looking at the brain before we start expecting people to change behaviors.
Man. Fascinating stuff, Brian. I just tell you, it's just, it's really kind of opened my brain to so many different things and thought processes. So I'm thankful for all that you've done for me personally, my family. And I know that you've helped out some friends of ours as well. They can go to the Brain Performance Center. What's the website that you guys have?
Brainperformance.com. So just brainperformance.com.
Okay.
Or, we have centers at, like I said, Oaks Christian School, at Calabasas Pediatrics, and then at Engage Therapy here in Westlake as well.
Okay,
so,
great.
Brainperformance.com will get them to any of those.
Yeah, so that's great.
Or
Brian,
call you personally.
Yeah. Man, I know Reunion is going to be better for the wisdom that you dropped on us today. So thank you so much.
Mark, I appreciate you having me, and look forward to seeing you again.
All right, brother. Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Well, Reunion, man, what could our communities look like and our neighborhoods look like if they knew and believed that instead of receiving judgment from followers of Jesus, they got empathy? Instead of a cold shoulder, they received proactive care for their family. What would our church look like if we could look at the deeper message behind the behavior of those who are hurting? I believe we would be like that home we have referred to over the last year and a half, found in Luke 15, where the prodigal son comes home to the dad with open arms. We want to be that kind of family, joy-filled for the homecoming, compassion-filled to give grace for the broken. Friends, I'm not sure where you find yourselves mentally, spiritually, emotionally, but I want to finish our time together reading something that Paul wrote in Philippians. It's Philippians 4, verses 4 through 9. This is from the Message translation, but listen into this scripture from Paul. It says, "Celebrate God all day, every day. I mean, revel in Him. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you are on their side, working with them and not against them. Help them see that the Master is about to arrive. He could show up any minute." I mean, this whole series has been about helping us to understand, come alongside the broken and hurting, working with them so that we can point to our Master and Savior, Jesus, who is coming. Verse 6, it says, don't fret or worry. Instead of worry, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. I'm sure if you're human, you have worried some over the last 6 to 7 weeks. I found this to be true, though. When I turn my worries into prayers and I read out loud from my journal my struggle, something happens within my heart that I have peace, knowing God is going to bring everything together. Finally, these last two verses, verses 8 and 9, summing it all up, friends, he says, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things that are true, noble, and reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, the things to praise, not the things to curse. Put into practice what you have learned from me, what you have heard and saw and realized, and do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. Guys, to have a healthy mind and a healthy life, we must meditate on the best. We must meditate on the beautiful. We must praise the things that we need to give praise to. Do what Paul says, and God is going to fill you up with purpose and hope. And friends, my heart goes out to so many of you who might be struggling right now, that maybe you feel lost, maybe you feel hopeless. But I want to just challenge you with these verses that we have read from Philippians 4, that you would write down your hurts, your pains, your frustrations, and that you would begin to ask God just to do something with that. God, I don't know what to do with this, but God, I know that you're powerful. Please do something here. And if you would get into a rhythm of that, I know and trust and believe that he will do something within your heart. This morning, I read a news article about how prayer is, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, how prayer changes the brain. Friends, these were scientists, secular scientists. You and I know why it changes the brain, because God can do that. Let's trust and believe that there is a God out there who loves and cares for you deeply and wants you to have purpose and hope. I'd love to pray for you before we sign off here today. But again, be looking this week for an email. If you don't have communication from us, email us at info@reunionto.com to get on our email list so that you can know what's happening. I'll email out the Zoom link for next weekend's time together, along with, we'll post that in some of our social media and text it out as well. So, friends, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you so much for all the positive feedback we've gotten about this last 4 to 5 weeks together. I believe it's going to be instrumental in helping us in this next season as we enter into it as a church together. Let me pray for us. God, I pray for our church. I pray for those who are listening. I pray for those who are maybe wondering if you still care about them. God, we know that you do. We know that you know the number of hairs on our head, God. God, I pray for those who are anxious during this season, that you'll fill them up with encouragement, knowing that you have it and we don't. You're big, we're small. You created the universe. We didn't create anything, but you did, and you're our God. So God, I pray that that will bring peace to people. I pray for those who might have loved ones who are struggling with some sort of challenge within their brain, whether that be a physical or a mental or emotional challenge. I pray that you will heal them, God, right now in Jesus' name. I believe that you're a God of miracles, and I believe in faith that you can do that. So God, I lift that up to you. Whoever that might be, I lift them up to you. God, I pray for our church, God, that we would be a beacon of hope, Lord, because of how well equipped we are to go into conversations with people and go to hard places with them. Not scared that we won't have the right answer, but confident that we have the ability to walk right alongside them, just as you walk alongside us in our hard times. Oh God, I love you. I thank you for the church. I thank you for the people. God, knit our hearts together even during these tough times. Help us to be resilient through the power of your Spirit. God, I pray that we could have this mental image of that father running down the pathway with his face smiling, arms open wide, ready to receive his child. God, may we carry that image this week, and that you will give us joy from knowing that we have a Father that opens his arms wide for us, no matter our mental, emotional state, no matter what we've been through or done. He wants to hold us, care for us, and tell us how much he loves us. We love you, Father. Thank you for guys like Brian and the many others we've had on this this series. Thank you for how you've gifted each individual in your kingdom to equip us to better make disciples and go. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.